What if the Amityville Horror was real? On November 13th, 1974, 6 members of the DeFeo family were found dead in their beds at 112 Ocean Avenue in Amityville, Long Island. The father was shot in his bed. The mother was shot in hers. 4 of the children were shot where they slept. The whole family was dead before sunrise. The only one home was Ronald DeFeo Junior, 23 years old. He told Suffolk County Police that he had found the bodies when he came home from work that morning. 4 months later, Ronald Jr. confessed. He had killed his family himself. He said he had heard voices in the house, voices that told him to do it. A jury found him guilty of second-degree murder. The Lutz family moved in 13 months later. They did not know the house's history. The realtor told them the previous owner had died of a heart attack. The price for the street was low. The Lutz family moved in on December 18, 1975. They moved out on January 14, 1976. They were inside the house for 28 days. George Lutz was 28 years old when he and his new wife Kathy took out a mortgage on 112 Ocean Avenue. Kathy was 26. The 2 of them had been married earlier that year. George's 3 children from a previous marriage, Daniel, Christopher, and Missy, were going to live with them. The family was Catholic. The family had roots on Long Island. The house, in late 1975, was the kind of house that people talked about as a starter home. 3 bedrooms, 1.5 baths, a quarter-moon window over the front door, a swimming pool in the back, an unfinished basement with a stone fireplace. The first night, George and Kathy walked through the house together. They were happy. The house was theirs. They were starting a new family under a roof of their own. Kathy went to bed first. George stayed up. He walked through the rooms. He noticed the temperature. The house was cold, even with the heat on. He went down to the basement to check the furnace. When he came back up the basement stairs, he saw a black, shapeless mass in the corner of the foyer. No face, no outline, no shape he could describe in any words he knew. The mass was there, and it was not a shadow, and it was not a trick of light, and it was gone before he could turn to face it directly. He did not say anything to Kathy that night. He went to bed. The next morning, the front door was open. The lock was still thrown. No one had a key but the family. Over the next 4 weeks, the events accumulated. Green slime appeared on the walls and on the bathroom floor, in places the family had not been the day before. A small, pig-like face appeared in the fireplace. It looked at George for a long moment, then disappeared. Flies appeared inside the house in the middle of January, hundreds of them, in the dead of winter. The family dog, a German shepherd named Harry, refused to enter certain rooms. Harry began growling at a corner of the basement that was empty when the family checked it. On the night of January 14th, Kathy's mother called. The family priest, Father Raymond, had died that day. The family, already disturbed, was further disturbed by the call. That night, George went to bed at 3 in the morning. He woke at 3 a.m. to the sound of the front door slamming. He got up. He looked out the window. The door was still. The lock was still thrown. He went back to bed. He woke again. The temperature in the bedroom had dropped to about 50 degrees. The clock on the wall said 6:15. The room was lit by a green, sourceless light. Kathy's eyes were open, but she was not awake. George's body, by his own account, told years later to a parapsychologist, was lifted off the bed. He could not move. He could not scream. In the morning, the family left the house. They left almost everything behind. They never went back. Father Ralph Bonner was the parish priest of the Amityville Catholic Church in December 1975. He had been a priest for 28 years. He had been the one who had told the Lutz family about the house in a casual conversation, not as a real estate referral, but as a mention of a property that was, for the price, surprisingly available. Father Bonner had been inside the house once, briefly, before the Lutz family moved in. He had felt, in his own words, that the house was not a house that any family should live in. After the Lutz family left, Father Bonner went to the house to bless it. He went with another priest, a Jesuit consultant, who specialized in cases of reported demonic activity. The blessing took about an hour. The two priests moved from room to room in the standard Catholic blessing pattern: holy water, incense, a brief prayer for the deliverance of the soul. The blessing took about an hour. The two priests did not say publicly what they saw. They did not say publicly what they felt. The Diocese of Rockville Center did not make a formal statement on the Lutz case for many years. What Father Bonner did say, in a long interview given to a documentary film crew in 1979, was that he believed the Lutz family had been subjected to something. He told the interviewer that he did not know what. He added that he did not want to know what. He told the interviewer, finally, that the family had done the right thing by leaving. In a separate interview, also in 1979, Father Bonner described a voice that he had heard while blessing the house. The voice, he said, had said in a clear, distinct whisper, "Get out." He said he had heard the voice 3 times from 3 different rooms while he was alone. The Jesuit consultant who was with him at the time has, in writing, corroborated the testimony. The Catholic Church does not, in its formal theology, make a habit of saying that any particular house is haunted. The Church has a formal process for cases of reported demonic activity. It is called an investigation, and the process is private. The Lutz case was not formally investigated under the canonical process. The informal response, a blessing, a private interview, a public statement of belief that the family had experienced something was the most the diocese would say then or later. Hans Holzer was a parapsychologist based in New York City. He had a PhD from the University of London. He had investigated, by his own count, more than 2,000 cases of reported hauntings in his career. He was not, by his own description, a believer in the supernatural. He was, by his own description, a researcher. Holzer came to the Amityville case in early 1977. The Lutz family had by then moved to California. They had not, by then, told their story publicly. Holzer was invited to investigate by an independent producer who had been developing a documentary on the case. Holzer agreed. He took with him a colleague, a channeler, and trance medium named Ethel Johnson Meyers, and a sound engineer. Holzer and Meyers visited the house. They walked through it. Meyers entered a trance state in the basement. She channeled, in a voice that Holzer's sound engineer recorded, a presence that identified itself as a former inhabitant of the property. Meyers' reading was that the presence had been there since the 1800s. The same reading held that the presence was angry. The reading further held that the presence had been present on the night of the DeFeo murders. Holzer wrote a book about the case. The book, titled Murder in Amityville, was published in 1977. Within the book, Holzer argued that the Lutz case was not the first haunting of the property. Holzer also argued that the Lutz case was the latest in a long series of reports of anomalous activity in the same house. Holzer further argued that the DeFeo murders themselves may have been influenced by whatever had been in the house before the family moved in. Holzer's argument was met with skepticism by the parapsychology community. The American Society for Psychical Research, which had never formally investigated the case, declined to endorse Holzer's book. The book sold well, in spite of the skepticism. It was the first widely read book on the case. It was the foundation for what came after. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue did not stay empty. In 1985, almost 10 years after the Lutz family left, a new family bought it. James and Barbara Webster, with their 2 young daughters, took possession of the property in the spring of that year. The Websters knew the history of the house. The Websters bought it at a price that was, for the property, below market. The Websters planned to raise their daughters in the house. The Websters lived in the house for almost 20 years. In that time, they reported, in formal interviews given to a New York City television station in 2005, a series of events that were, in their description, the same kind of events the Lutz family had reported. The temperature in certain rooms dropped without explanation. Doors opened and closed by themselves. The family dog refused to enter the basement. Green slime appeared on the walls. A small face appeared, more than once, in the fireplace. Voices, indistinguishable words, but unmistakably, voices were heard in rooms where no one was present. The Websters did not leave the house in 28 days, the way the Lutz family had. The Websters lived with the events. The Websters became, in their own words, accustomed. The Websters had their daughters blessed by a Catholic priest, in a ceremony that mirrored the blessing Father Bonner had performed a decade earlier. The Websters sold the house in 2005. The house changed hands twice more in the next 2 years. The current owners, as of the publication of this video, have not made a public statement about the property. The house is, from the outside, an ordinary Dutch colonial in a quiet Long Island suburb. The quarter-moon windows are still there. The gambrel roof is still there. The swimming pool in the back is still there. The price the Websters sold it for, when they did sell, was below market. Stephen King, the American novelist, was asked about the Amityville case in an interview with a magazine in 1977. The case was not yet, at that point, a published book. The quote King gave the magazine was that the Lutz story was, in his opinion, the most horrifying true story he had ever read. The quote was widely reprinted. In October 1977, J. Anson published a book titled The Amityville Horror. The book was a literary retelling of the Lutz case, with composite characters, with scenes that Anson said were based on interviews, and with a series of events that escalated bores in the yard, levitation, possession, to a final night in which the family fled the house and watched the windows go black in the rearview mirror of their car. The book sold 4 million copies in its first year. It was the biggest-selling horror book of the year. The book became a film in 1979 with James Brolin and Margot Kidder. The film changed the names of the family. The film changed the dates. The film added characters. The film made the green slime into a subplot. The film made the pig-like face into a recurring image. The film ended with the family now called the Lutz family, but a fictional composite leaving the house in a snowstorm. The book has never been out of print. The film has been remade 3 times, in 2005, in 2017, and as a documentary titled My Amityville Horror in 2012. The Wikipedia article on the case, as of this writing, has more than 500 references. The story, in some form, is told in almost every anthology of American hauntings published since 1977. The interesting question is not whether the story has been told. The story has been told. The interesting question is what the story has been told about. Ronald Jr. DeFeo, in his trial in 1975, was found guilty of second-degree murder. His defense had been, in part, that he had been subjected to demonic influence. The defense had been a formal motion, with a formal witness, and the judge had refused to allow it. The judge had, in his formal ruling, said that demonic possession was not a legal defense in Suffolk County, New York, and that the court could not, in the absence of any corroborating evidence, allow the case to proceed on that basis. DeFeo was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms. The Lutz family sued Father Bonner in 1978 in a civil case that alleged that the priest had failed in his duty to disclose the history of the property. The case was settled out of court. The terms of the settlement have never been disclosed. The Lutz family moved to California. They did not return to the property. In 1979, a journalist and author named Herman Weberman, no relation to the property's owners, published a book titled The Amityville Horror Conspiracy. The argument, in short, was that the Lutz case was a fabrication. George Lutz, on this reading, had not actually experienced the events he later described. He had been in contact with a producer before the family moved in, who had a financial interest in a possible book or film deal. The events in this reading had been staged for the purpose of generating a media property. Weberman's book was met with a defamation lawsuit from the Lutz family. The lawsuit was settled. Weberman did not retract the book. The book was reissued in a second edition in 1980 with the addition of a long appendix in which Weberman responded to specific points in the original Amityville Horror book, paragraph by paragraph. The second edition is still in print. The argument Weberman made has never been definitively resolved. The Lutz family, for their part, has never retracted the story. George Lutz gave a final interview in 2006, just before his death. The interview, given to a New York radio station, is the last public statement from him. In it, he stands by the story. He says the family experienced what they said they experienced. He says the public can decide what to believe. The DeFeo murders are real. The Lutz family is real. The Websters are real. Father Bonner is a real person with a real record who said what he said. Hans Holzer is a real person with a PhD who wrote what he wrote. Stephen King is a real person with a public record of what he has said. The book is real, and the films are real, and the Weberman expose is real. The question, the one that has been asked for 50 years, is what the events at 112 Ocean Avenue actually were. Boring is what the official explanation is. Sad is what the official explanation is. A young man with a history of mental illness, with a record of drug use, with a father who was, by multiple accounts, a difficult man, shot his family. The episode is a tragedy. It became a New York State criminal case. The trial ended in a conviction. The house went on the market. New families moved in, new families moved out. The Lutz family had a difficult experience. The Lutz family wrote a book. The book sold. Less boring is what the alternative explanation is. Less boring and less supported. A house in which, for almost 200 years, something has been present. Multiple families across multiple decades have given similar descriptions. A Catholic priest with a long record of service said he believed in it. A parapsychologist with a PhD from a real university wrote a book about it. Stephen King, the most read horror novelist of the 20th century, called it the most horrifying true story he had ever read. You can decide which kind of explanation is the more interesting one. You can also decide which kind is the more supported one. The two decisions do not always go the same way. The house is still there. The quarter-moon windows are still there. The swimming pool is still there. The address is still 112 Ocean Avenue. The families who have lived there over the years have left their own records. The records do not agree. What was real is the question. The records are what the question asks us to weigh.